All right, man.
Hello there, sir.
We are still in chapter 10, and I guess we're going to be in chapter 10 for a while yet.
Yeah, Rule 10's a big one.
This section here is related to fear, right?
Right. And we're in that subsection 2 we left off where it starts to talk about depression.
Yeah, depression, or its polar opposite, hilarity.
Yep.
It's 143 on the PDF.
And 306 in the blue book, right at the bottom half.
All right, let's get started here. So this is something we should all be familiar with again as well. Depression, or its polar opposite, hilarity. When we touch on the subject of depression, we are dealing with something so widespread that few escape its attacks. It's like a miasma, a fog, which environs the man and makes it impossible for him to see clearly, walk surely, and cognize reality. It is part of the great astral illusion. And if this is grasped, it will become apparent why depression exists, for the cause of it is either astral or physical, an incident to a world situation or a personal situation. We might therefore study depression in individuals and look at its causes. It is caused by, right? One, the world glamour. This sweeps an isolated unit, otherwise free from individual conditions producing depression, into the depths of a world reaction. This world glamour, with its devitalizing and depressing results, has its roots in various factors which we have only the time to briefly indicate. A, astrological factors, either affecting the planetary chart and hence individuals, or primarily racial. These two factors are oft overlooked. So those two factors are astrological or racial. And then B, the path of the sun in the heavens. The southern path tends to a lowered vibratory frequency, and aspirants should bear this in mind in autumn and the early winter months. Okay, so now we're getting into some interesting stuff about cycles, which we've been talking so much about for a year, for a long time now, right? The southern path tends to a lower vibratory influence, and aspirants should bear this in mind in autumn and in the early winter months. So SAD, right? Seasonal seasonal depression, right? It's called SAD, which is prevalent in Alaska and in some of those northern places, right? Where there's a lot of depression, and it would make sense why, right? C, the dark half of the moon, the period towards the end of the waning moon and the early new moon. This, as you well know, affects the meditation work. D, psychological factors and mass inhibitions due undoubtedly to forces external to the planet and to plans obscure in their intent to ordinary humanity. Obscure in their intent to ordinary humanity. Psychological factors and mass inhibitions due to forces external to the planet. Okay, that's interesting. These forces playing upon the human race affect the most sensitive. They, in their turn, affect our environment, and gradually a momentum is established which sweeps through a race or a nation, through a period or a cycle of years, and produces conditions of profound depression and of mutual distrust. It causes a sad self-absorption, and this we term a panic or wave of unrest. The fact that the working out may be military, economic, social, or political, that it may take the form of a war or a religious inquisition, of financial stringency, or international distrust is incidental. The causes lie back in the blueprints of the evolutionary process and are governed even if unrealized by the good law. And that is wild, man.
Yeah. So that
What's
is
your
that.
thought on it?
Well, I was just gonna. It's really more of a question, or I guess a thought. Was we read that through that last sentence. That well, so I guess just backing up through the whole section. So it's clear that astrological phases, depending on which season of the year it is, so that would determine the path of the sun, and the phases of the moon have an impact on depression. Can be kind of, I guess, a contributing factor depending on where we are in those particular phases. The psychological factors is a bit of a doozy, because, or at least in reading that last sentence, what kind of struck me was that it's not really kind of how these things play out necessarily that are causing the psychological distress, rather the underlying reasoning of why we found ourselves in the positions of these different, like military action or economic turmoil, religious inquisitions and things like that, where yes, those things are depressing to think about, right? But there's something underlying that causes those things to occur that is the real root cause of the depression. And that's where the reference here of the good law. So if people were following the good law, we might not have all of these variety of outcomes.
Well, and these are just the expressions of the energy.
Right.
What the one thing that I thought of in the line above that, and a couple lines above that, is, we watched this whole country become preppers.
Yeah. Right. Prepping for something that might not even really occur.
Right. And for self-preservation purposes, we watched the country go out and want to protect themselves in all of those ways discussed: military, economic, social, and the political thing. That's hammering down right now, because that's easy to see every day. You turn on the news or look at politics, and those factors there, we've talked about this before, but forces playing upon the human race affect the most sensitive. Undoubtedly, forces external to the planet, and we know that Pluto is playing a big part in the last year, digging up old stuff, right? Bringing things to light, and then there's the physical, implications of
right.
What are we looking at? So this is a big question, right?
Right.
What are we looking at here in people's actions and decisions?
Right. Well, and are those actions or kind of these avenues of approach that people are taking, because you mentioned the preppers, and it can go far beyond that too. It's really anybody that puts themselves into a position where they're stressing themselves to prepare for something that may or may not occur.
Right.
That really in and of itself is causing you a lot of stress and could be leading to a depressive state, right? Now, certainly I don't want to knock people that do these things, because they need to work through those things on their own. I'm not one to shatter down people's sandcastles. If that's what they want to do, so be it. I'm just saying that you can get yourself lost in that type of world and really create your own hell in a way, because you're putting forth a lot of effort and throwing a lot of bearing stress on your shoulders, and probably depressing yourself to a state for something that may not even come to fruition.
In order to really see this, there has to be that spiritual turn, though, right?
Right.
You have to be awakened to the spiritual side of life at this point in order to really see through the astral plane, I think.
Yeah, and having that faith that, you have what you have and you have to work through it. And try not to concern yourself with what the end result may or may not be,
Right.
because things are going to shake out however they're supposed to shake out, regardless of how much you put on yourself to kind of foresee what may or may not come.
And this is the herd, right? We're talking about the mass of men at this point. So, it's easy to see these things if you can, be the observer, because these are all like trends.
Right.
Simple, man, it's crazy. Let's go with number 2 is astral polarization. Just as long as a man identifies himself with his emotional body, just as long as he interprets life in terms of his moods and feelings, just as long as he reacts to desire, just so long will he have his moments of despair, of darkness, of doubt, of dire distress, and of depression. So that's, so long as we are, reacting to these things, and we are identifying ourselves with our emotional body, then, this is the Four Noble Truths right here, right? This is the Buddha. This is talking about, the reason we suffer is because of desire. And
Right.
just
Yeah, that's a key thing to point out there too, is that we've talked about it before, becoming consumed with your desires, because that leads to selfishness versus where we're supposed to be selfless, and really doing things for the betterment of the greater good, as opposed to just fulfilling your own personal selfish desires, which in and of itself creates a lot of stress and depression, because you can attain those things, but then what? You're always going to want more. So you need to shed that stuff away and understand that there's something greater out there, but that everything needs to be done from a selfless and world-serving point of view.
Yeah. Well, and DK goes on here and he says, there's no need to dwell on this. If there is one factor aspirants recognize, it is the need of freeing themselves from the great illusion. Arjuna knew this, yet succumbed to despair. Yet in his hour of need, Krishna failed him not, but laid down in the Gita the simple rules whereby depression and doubt can be overcome. They may be briefly summarized as follows. Know thyself to be the undying one. That's A. B. Control thy mind, for through that mind, the undying one can be known. And C. Learn that the form is but the veil which hides the splendor of divinity. D. Realize that the one life pervades all forms, so that there is no death, no distress, and no separation. And lastly, detach thyself, therefore, from the form side and come to me, so dwelling in the place where light and life are found. Thus, illusion ends. And those are, those are the truths there, right? Like that's the message. That's huge. It is his astral polarization which lays a man open to his emotional reactions and to waves of mass feeling of any kind. This is the cause of his being swept into that vortex of uncontrolled energy and misdirected emotional force, which eventuates in a world war, a financial panic, a religious revival, or a lynching. It is this also that raises him to the heights of hilarity and of spurious happiness, in which the light deceptive of the astral plane uncovers to him false sources of amusement, or the mass hilarity, owing to his sensitivity, sweeps him into that hysterical condition which finds its vent in unrestrained merriment, and which is the opposite pole of unrestrained weeping. I refer not here to true merriment, nor the proper sense of humor, but to those hysterical outbreaks of hilarity, which are so common among the rank and file of humanity and lead to reactions of fatigue. Now, in your experience, Tom, because this is not my experience, this book was written a long time ago. I don't see a lot of hilarity in my life, and I haven't. Now, this is we're talking about a very different, generation now. Things are much more bleak today, and any hysterical outbreak of hilarity would be really noticeable. I mean, maybe we saw Hillary Clinton on TV, that famous, video of her acting all crazy. But I don't, what do you think?
Well, just reading over it again here, it is this also that raises him to the heights of hilarity and of spurious happiness, in which the light deceptive of the astral plane uncovers to him false sources of amusement, or the mass hilarity,
It's the
owing
opposite
to the
pole,
sensitivity.
unrestrained weeping.
Merriment.
Yeah, I just, that's not something that I've really witnessed in this life.
But this uncovering of false sources of amusement is also a part of that. Yeah,
All right.
I don't know.
I don't know. It's just my experience. I just didn't. Maybe that was more prevalent when this was written,
Yeah. Well, but I think it's saying that it could be, it's the opposite pole of unrestrained weeping. I'm not sure. Because is it saying here that, us find refuge in false sources of amusement is a part of this hilarity? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know. All right, let's keep going. 3 is a devitalized condition of the physical body. This is due to various causes, such as a depleted etheric or vital body. B, physical disease, either inherent or brought over from another life, accidental, or due to wrong emotional reactions, or produced as the result of group karma, such as an epidemic. C, atmospheric. This is sometimes overlooked, but the condition of the atmosphere, the nature of the climate, the density, humidity, or dryness, the heat or cold have a definite effect upon the psychological outlook. And I would add to that, just because I saw this in Agni Yoga, where Master Moria talks about altitude has a big effect on these types of things as well. Now, I don't know if it's the same, but here he says climate. So they're,
well, you're depending on your altitude could create atmospheric fluctuations.
Yeah, it changes your
you're at a higher versus
everything.
Yeah, the atmosphere is different at a higher elevation than it would be low, so that makes sense.
You don't need as much food. There's all sorts of intense changes that happen in the astral body. There's changes that are mentioned. It's pretty interesting stuff to look into. But so those are, so just, there's a ton of reasons for, potential depression, right? Climate, I get that. Humidity or dryness, the heat or cold have a definite effect upon psychological outlook. Sure. Cold for certain. And for some people, heat, I assume, right? Some people don't like it. I don't like being frozen cold. That's just me. You will find if you study that all subsidiary and temporary causes of depression and its opposite can be grouped under one of these three heads. And when one has ascertained the cause, the cures will become apparent. I have dealt somewhat at length with the two first manifestations of the astral force, fear of death, of the future, of suffering, of failure, and the many lesser fears to which humanity is subject, and depression, because these two fears constitute for man the dweller on the threshold in this age and cycle. Both of them indicate sentient reaction to psychological factors and cannot be dealt with by the use of another factor such as courage. They cannot be dealt with. So you can't tell people to have courage, essentially, and then that be a remedy. Is that what I just read there in a way? By the use of
Read
another
over it
factor.
again. What that indicates.
Cannot be dealt with by the use of another factor such as courage. They must be met by the omniscience of the soul working through the mind, not by its omnipotence. Wow. And this is to be found in occult hint. I shall not deal with the other factors listed, such as desire for happiness, for the satisfaction of the animal appetites, and for liberation, for these do not constitute for the majority such a problem as the first two. What were the first two again? First two were fear of death and of the future.
Hang on.
Oh, depression.
Yeah, fear and depression.
Yeah, fear and depression. One could write at length on the manifestation and the cause of all these, but when fear and depression are overcome, see, I shouldn't have said anything, it was coming right after that, are overcome, the race will enter into its heritage of happiness, of true satisfaction, of which the cravings above indicated are but the symbols, and of liberation. Let us deal with the basic evils first. Once they have been dominated, all that remains is right orientation and polarization in the soul. We will next consider the overcoming of wrong vibration in the astral body and the use of astral energy in the right direction. Cool. We have been dealing at length with the subject of the astral or sentient body and have considered the various wrong ways in which it makes its presence felt. Humanity vibrates primarily in one or other of these ways, and the sentient body of the average human being is scarcely ever free from some mood, some fear, some excitement. This has provided a condition whereby the solar plexus center is abnormally developed. In the bulk of humanity, the sacral center and the solar plexus govern life, and that is why desire for material living and for the sex life are so closely blended. Wow. And if that isn't easy to be seen, right? A material and sex life, that's like the whole United States, right? The solar plexus in the animal is the brain and governs all the instinctual reactions, but is not so closely allied with the purely sex expression as it is in the human being. The solar plexus in the animal is the brain and governs all the instinctual reactions. Well, that's very deep, but is not so closely allied with the purely sex expression as it is in the human being. When the brain is becoming sensitive to the awakening mind and is not so entirely occupied with the mechanism which registers sensory impression, we shall have the orientation which will eventually raise the consciousness into those centers which lie above the diaphragm. The solar plexus will then again be relegated to its old function as a directing agent of the purely instinctual animal life. For the advanced pupil in the world, the solar plexus is largely the organ of psychic sensitivity and will remain so until the higher psychic powers supersede the lower and man functions as a soul. Then the sensory life will drop below the threshold of consciousness. Wow. What do you got?
Kind of want to go back. Well, no, I lost it. Is it an astral polarization? Where we were trying to wrap our heads around the polarity. It is his astral polarization which lays a man open to his many emotional reactions into waves of mass feeling of any kind. This is the cause of his being swept into that vortex of uncontrolled energy and misdirected emotional force, which eventuates in a world war, financial panic, religious revival, or lynching. It is this also that raises him to the heights of hilarity and of spurious happiness, in which the light deceptive of the astral plane uncovers him to false sources of amusement. Or the mass hilarity, owing to his sensitivity, sweeps him into the astral condition, which finds its vent in unrestrained merriment, and which is the opposite pole of unrestrained weeping. So, is it saying there, is that essentially a caution against it's like, is it a caution against like a false sense of merriment? That one's kind of, when I read that, I think of like, is it really true happiness by finding enjoyment and merriment in false sources of amusement? So like going to Vegas.
Yeah, man, it would be probably anything outside of the soul,
Right.
because it's really that is the
But
source of true happiness, right?
and that's what I think it's saying here, right? Is this is because kind of like a caution of, this isn't really, those things aren't really what create happiness for you. In fact, they can have an opposite effect and create a very depressive state. The true happiness comes from much deeper within.
Yeah, and you know, even this material living and sex life, you know, that's false too. Right. So it's all false. And this, I guess it's all, you know, it's just what's happening until we recognize these things and can begin to, you know, contact the soul and get this under control.
Yeah.
For the advanced pupil, the solar plexus is largely the organ of psychic sensitivity. Not so much, I guess, for purely, you know, instinctual animal life.
Right. And will remain that way until you've raised above the lower, really.
Until we're functioning as souls. You know, then the sensory life drops. Yeah. Well, I think we can probably continue on here.
Yeah, move into the right use of energy.
Yeah, I think it's about 4 pages.
Yeah, it's not a very long section.
This will be a great way to leave this week too, to focus on the right way to, you know, to use it. So let's go on.
Let's jump in.
In considering the overcoming of wrong vibration and the right direction of astral energy, it might be of value here if we were very briefly to list the major energies which impress the human organism and circulate through the sentient body of man. One, the energies passing and repassing through the sentient body of the planet itself. This is, in other words, the astral body of the spirit of the earth. This entity is not the planetary logos, but a being of great power on the involutionary arc. Oh, dang. Who holds the same relation to the planetary logos as the astral elemental does to the human being. That is intense. Facts about this life. Now, is there a secret hidden in there, buddy? Am I missing something? Like, I want to keep going, but who holds the same relation to the planetary logos as the astral elemental does to the human being? And this astral elemental and the astral body of the planet are on the involutionary arc. So it's like, we're like crossing, like crossing paths, like, and it's something that has to be worked through. I never considered that there were, and it's been said before, but I had never really considered that there are other beings, this elementals and such like this, that are on an involutionary arc, and that that's something I hadn't really thought of.
Never really considered that. Yeah.
I thought the whole thing, I thought we were all on the evolutionary arc. Well, I don't want to go into that because I don't know that'll get cleared up later, I'm sure. And I don't know anything about it. I know that we are on the involutionary arc, but I don't know about that stuff there. Facts about this life will be found in a treatise on cosmic fire. Okay, we're gonna have to take a look now. Its life is the aggregate of a vast number of lives, and those lunar Petries or lesser builders who constitute the sentient life of the personality aspect of the planetary logos, a more potent force for good and also for evil, as we use the word evil. Evil per se is non-existent, as is good in the sense of the pairs of opposites. Only in time and in space are there varying states of consciousness, producing differing outer effects. The energy of this involutionary life has a potent effect on that other tiny involutionary life, which constitutes our astral elemental. So the astral's dying, basically. That's all we're saying there. That's something that is going to be left behind and is going out of, as we're going ahead, that is obviously going to be left behind, right? The fact that protects from complete sensitive identification with this greater life is man's individuality and the potency of his rapidly coordinating personality. Man is an individual. He is the result of other factors, and the combination of these factors constitutes his protection from the complete absorption in the planetary sentient life, as is the case with the animals. At death, man's astral body disintegrates, and then its particles again constitute undifferentiated fragments of the great whole. Undifferentiated fragments of the great whole. So is there an implication there that how we leave our astral body is of significant importance to the whole, right? That's pretty deep. Certain astral energies emanating from some planetary forms, which as yet exist not in the form of physical planets, nor yet in the etheric realm, but which are enclosed within the ring pass knot of our solar system. They represent, in the planetary sense, two groups of lives. First, those astral shells of decaying and disintegrating planets, which are to be seen by the initiate, still revolving around our sun, but which are nevertheless fast disappearing. Our moon will join their number when the complete disintegration of the outer form has taken place. Second, the astral forms of those lesser solar lives on the evolutionary arc, who are taking form slowly but have not yet taken an etheric body, and will never in this world period take a physical body. These two groups are the planetary correspondences to the reincarnating types of men, and to those who have passed over and are slowly shedding their bodies prior to eventual rebirth, or who have completely vacated their shells. Boy, if that isn't something to contemplate, right? That's something to meditate on there, man. You know.
Agreed.
That's the astral forms of those lesser lives on this. Yeah, that's deep there. Okay. There are two of these astral forms in close proximity to our Earth, which are rapidly decomposing, if I may so term it, and yet have a very potent influence. On account of this close relation, they produce two types of desire or of astral tendency among men. One produces much of that instinctual tendency to cruelty, which one sees in children and in certain types of men, and the other has an effect upon the sex life and produces some of those tendencies to perversions, which cause so much difficulty now. Sadistic tendencies and sex perversions find much strengthening influence from these dying astral emanations. In ancient days, they were still more potent, being closer to our Earth than now, hence the ritualistic cruelties and the horrors, for instance, of Sodom and Gomorrah. Their power is rapidly declining, and it should be remembered that they would have no power at all were there not in humanity itself certain instincts upon which these energies can work. It should also be remembered that in Lemurian times, their influence was constructive, for in those days, the lesson of sex and the intelligent registering of pain had a place in the schemes of those who were endeavoring to lead animal man into human consciousness, not into soul consciousness or even into self-consciousness in those very early times.
So that's just really referencing the evolution, the evolutionary path that the human race has been on.
And some of those tendencies are still here.
Right. And I think we, if we look back at some of the earlier sessions we had in White Magic with Carla, she talked about that to some length as far as the Lemurians and I can't remember the other one, but anyway.
Atlantean, yeah.
Thank you, the
Atlanteans.
Atlanteans. Yeah. And how through those phases, that's where they were, first there was the mastery of the physical, and we have moved far beyond that. And they were there to master the whole astral aspect,
right?
Which is where a lot of these sex perversions came from.
Right.
But now that we're supposed to be focusing in on mastery of the mental, it's not to say that there won't be sex. It's just it's taking on a different state. There has to be a mental aspect to all of these things that we do. And we have to be cautious of, I guess, regressing into these past practices of earlier, of earlier times.
Animal, the animal instinct for sex, is what, really dissipates.
Right.
Right. Yeah, and DK says it'll just be like it'll be a normalized appetite, right? Like
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, man. This is close to our Earth, on the road to rebirth, is a great life in process of taking etheric form. This life, being on the evolutionary arc and not constituting the life of a decaying shell, is having a real effect in the inauguration of the new age. This effect is twofold. Through the emanations from the astral body of this great life, the work of breaking down the separative wall of individualism, which demonstrates in a man as selfishness and in nations as nationalism, is carried forward. Through this rapidly integrating etheric body, this life is bringing the etheric body of our planet into a state of increased rapid vibration. Reference will be made in the treatise on cosmic fire to an avatar from Sirius who comes to bring about certain planetary effects. This life is not that avatar, but is in the nature of a forerunner of a Saint John the Baptist, who baptizes with water, astral emanations, and the Holy Ghost. More information along these lines is not possible, but mention is made of it, as the energies coming from these two factors must be borne in mind. It's interesting to look at nationalism here, right? And see it as kind of a level of ignorance in a way, right? When you
For sure.
consider we're on Earth and the whole world's in the brotherhood of humanity, and we're telling people that our place is better than your place, and
right,
whatnot. You should be like us.
Right.
It's interesting. All right, number 3 is astral energies emanating from the new sign of the zodiac, into which we are now entering, the sign of Aquarius. This sign, that of the water carrier, is a living sign and an emotional sign. It will, through the effect of its potent forces, stimulate the astral bodies of men into a new coherency, into a brotherhood of humanity, which will ignore all racial and national differences and will carry the life of men forward into synthesis and unity. This means a tide of unifying life of such power that one cannot now vision it, but which in 1,000 years will have welded all mankind into a perfect brotherhood. Its emotional effect will be to purify the astral bodies of men so that the material world ceases to hold such potent allure, and may in its later stages bring about a state of exaggeration as potent in the line of sentiency as that which we have undergone in the line of materiality. Wow. The final stages of all signs produce overdevelopment of the factor on which they most potently work. At present, the effect of this sign is constructive among the pioneers of the race and destructive among the rank and file of humanity. Facts about the coming Aquarian age can be searched for in the current books on this subject, and it profits not for me to enlarge upon them here. All right. So those are some more of the energies. Hold on, let me see here. I just want to put this back together again. And we're briefly listing the major energies which impress the human organism and circulate through the sentient body. I just wanted to reiterate that real quick. And we're moving on to number 5 now, right? Or is it 4?
4.
Oh yeah, 4. Sorry. Faint emanations from the sacred heart of the sun, unrecognized by the masses, but instantly calling forth response from the mystics of the race, who are asserting increasingly a group integrity of a very real moment and interest. These emanations are too high to be sensed by humanity at large, but the mystics react and are drawn together by the sensing of the new vibration. Their work is then to step down the vibration so that its effects can be sensed in time and by the foremost of the race. The work of this group of mystics must therefore inevitably grow, for the heart of the solar logos beats now in closer rhythm with this planet than has heretofore been the case, this not being a sacred planet. The love and thought of that divine life is turned towards this little daughter of a long-lost son, as our planet is sometimes called in the occult books of the great ones. All right, so let's just talk about that again really.
Sure.
What is our planet called here? It's called
Earth.
the little daughter of a long-lost son.
Right. And we are not on a sacred planet.
Right. Oh, the little daughter of a long-lost son. That is, I mean, and that is intense. All right. Number 5 is another mass emanation which sweeps the astral body of man into strenuous activity. Another mass emanation which sweeps the astral body of man into strenuous activity is the impulsive desire of the astral body of the fourth or human kingdom, viewing it as a whole or as the expression of a life. The sentient body of humanity responds in an unrealized manner to all the 4 above types of astral energy, and according to the caliber of the individual astral body, and according to the stage of development, so will come response. It is in this fact that the roots of mass psychology, of mob rule lie. Also, the roots of public opinion, so-called, are to be found here, but it will be long before the psychologists of the academic schools will recognize these 4 factors. It is with this type of sentient response that the leaders of men seek to work, molding the thoughts of men in order to awaken desire for this, that, and the other. They work with this type of sentient matter without the least understanding of the situation and without any comprehension of the factors which they are dealing. They work magnetically if on the second ray, and with the inspiring of fear through destruction if on the first ray. If on the third ray, they use the law of expediency. Thus, all 3 work with the astral bodies of men, and their capacity to succeed is dependent largely upon their own type of astral body and its power to attract others who are sufficiently developed to respond with adequate sentiency and then to carry forward the good work. The man in the street is therefore the victim of the astral potency of those who drive him either for their own ends or for the good of his soul, for it works in both directions. That, my friend, is powerful right there. That last few sentences are something else. Interesting. The man in the street is therefore the victim of the astral potency of those who drive him either for their own ends or for the good of his soul. Dang. All right. 6. The astral life or sensitive emanations of a man's surrounding family or friends. They affect him far more than he may credit, or he may affect them according to which side is positive and which is negative. Everyone we meet or contact, every person with whom we live or daily consort, has an effect upon us, either for good or evil. They either stir up our emotional nature in a good and high sense, and so aid its work of reorientation, or they lower its standards so that progress is hindered and the work of drawing downwards towards materiality is carried forward. This we know well, and it is unnecessary for me to enlarge upon it. Certainly we do.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's a lot of influence that comes from friends and family, right? And
Which way are they bringing you, though? Are they bringing you?
Well, that's
Are they
what it's
bringing you
alluding to
up, or
here.
are they drawing you down into the
There are
materiality?
some elements that bring you up. There are some elements that bring you down. We've heard of cases where, you know, there could be families that are so entangled in emotional responses to certain things that could be holding that whole family down, really.
Oh yeah.
And likewise with friends, there's the influence of friends, and peer pressure is probably a good example there of, you grow up and you want to fit into certain groups and things like that. So you feel that you have to do certain things that those that you want to impress upon in that group are doing. But, hindsight, and I'll admit I felt guilty that everybody falls guilty of that at some point in their life. But hindsight, I look back and some of that stuff is just really silly. Like, but that's where I am now versus where I was then. And all that was very necessary for me to kind of grow through and to where I am. And I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there in the same situation. But yeah, friends and family are highly influential, or can be, if you're not careful. And you have to be careful of which way the desires of that, well, the desire itself is something that pulls you low, but just those interactions, in which direction they could pull you and how you
Right.
work through that.
And he's really, if I'm seeing this correctly, what we're really looking at is, we're moving from the outside and getting closer in. Our families are affected by the social norms of everybody else too. So,
right.
It's kind of just shrinking in and getting closer to us now. Right. Like,
Right.
We've got a lot of things affecting us. Okay. I'm on 7, right?
7. Yes, sir.
The emotional astral sentient equipment, the emotional equipment with which a man enters into life, which he utilizes and which he builds as life progresses. Many a man is the victim of an emotional body which he has himself constructed as he responded to the energies of the groups enumerated above. We just said the astral body reacts to all emanations of a sensitive character in 3 ways. Emotional, the body is swept into response of some kind to the emanation of the astral bodies, group bodies, or individual of those surrounding him. This phrase warrants careful study. Group bodies, I think, is what he means, warrants careful study there. Be sensitive so we become sensitive. There is always a registering of all impressions by the sensitive astral body, even if emotional response lacks, and disciples have to learn to distinguish carefully between the two. Sometimes when emotional reaction lacks, as generally understood, there's nevertheless a registering of the originating cause, which sought to bring about an effect on the emotional body. There's a registering of all impressions, even if emotional response lacks. The disciples have to learn to distinguish carefully between the two, right? Okay. There's nevertheless a registering, even if there's no emotional response. So that's something to really consider there. Simple reaction is the last way, and it is the registering or the refusal to register or respond to an impact, to an emotional impression. This can be either good or bad. Yeah, that makes sense. You can't really ignore it.
Right.
Right. In all three cases, one or other of the pairs of opposites is chosen, and the choice depends upon the quality of the astral mechanism of the man concerned. A fourth method involves complete detachment from the emotional body altogether, and a complete capacity to isolate oneself from any sensory impressions at all, in order to serve with greater efficiency and to love with greater intelligence. Forget not, in the last analysis, love and emotion are not the same. So this means something completely different than ignoring it. Right. The practical question now arises, how is one to overcome the wrong vibration? First, it is necessary that one recognizes what wrong vibration is, and that one is able to register reaction. A vibration, an impulse, an emotion, a desire originate in a lower aspect of the form side. They differ from an emanation coming from the soul. The two impacts upon the sentient body must be recognized as different. The question has to be asked, is this reaction a response to personality life, or is it a response to the soul consciousness? Does this impulse, which seeks to sweep my sentient body into activity, come from the divine life within me, or is it coming from the form aspect in any of its manifestations? Does it cause my astral body to become active in such a way that those who are in rapport with me are hurt thereby or helped? Are they hindered or aided? A close study of one's emotional reactions brings one to the consideration of that basic characteristic, which cannot be overemphasized in view of the world's present condition: harmlessness. I tell you that the achieving of harmlessness in the positive sense, not in the negative, means the attainment of that step which leads definitely to the portal of initiation. When first mentioned, it sounds of small moment, and to bring the whole subject of initiation into such small account that it becomes unimportant. But let him who so thinks practice that positive harmlessness, which works out in right thought, because based on intelligent love, right speech, because governed by self-control, and right action, because founded on an understanding of the law. And he will find that the attempt will call forth all the resources of his being and take much time to achieve. It is not the harmlessness that comes from weakness and sentimental loving disposition, which dislikes trouble because it upsets the settled harmony of life and leads to consequent discomfort. It is not the harmlessness of the little evolved negative impotent man or woman who has not the power to hurt because possessing so little equipment wherewith damage can be done. It is the harmlessness that springs from true understanding and control of the personality by the soul that leads inevitably to spiritual expression in everyday life. It emanates from a capacity to enter into the consciousness and to penetrate into the realization of one's brother. And when this has been accomplished, all is forgiven and all is lost sight of in the desire to aid and to help. Response to wrong vibration will not be basically prevented by the methods of either building a shell or by insulation through the power of mantrams and visualization. These two methods are temporary expedients by which those who as yet have somewhat to learn seek to protect themselves. That makes a lot of sense. I think we've all certainly done that. The building of a shell leads to separativeness, as you well know, and necessitates the eventual overcoming of the habit of shell building. Right, so that's causing a problem. By doing that, you're having to overcome that, and the shattering and consuming of the shells already built. This latter can be more easily done than the overcoming of the habit. Automatically, the building process goes on until finally the aspirant has built so many ramparts around himself that he can neither go out nor can any contacts be made with him. The process of insulation, which is a more advanced practice and calls for more magical knowledge, consists of the emanating of certain energies of the vital body in a particular direction, which serve to keep other energies at a distance through what is called impact. And that's shamanism in a sense, to protecting, building the walls around your, that's what shamanism really, I remember, discusses a lot. Through this impact upon approaching energies, they are reversed and sent in another direction. But those energies must go somewhere. And should they damage another person, is not the one who reversed their direction, is not the one who reversed their direction through a desire to protect himself responsible. What is it? What's that saying about words? Just bounce off me and stick to you like glue or something.
Yeah. Right. I remember that as a kid.
Sticks and stones will break my bones, but words never hurt me. And then what you say, yeah, it's a kid thing though, right? What you say bounces off of me and sticks to you. I'm like glue or something. Anyway, that's kind of like how I see that in a sense, right?
I'm like rubber, you're like glue.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Words you say to me, or words bounce off me and stick to you, or something like that.
Yeah, cool. The practice of harmlessness is the best and easiest way for the aspirant to work. There is then nothing in him which is inimical to any life in any form, and he therefore attracts to himself only that which is beneficent. He uses the beneficent forces thus attracted for the helping of other beings. This has to be the first step, and the discipline it entails and the constant supervision of all the activities on the three planes of human evolution and of all reactions bring the emotional body under the dominance of the illumined mind. They also bring about the understanding of one's fellow men. There is secondly a later stage wherein the disciple learns to absorb and transmute the wrong vibrations and energies which are destructive. He has no shells nor barriers. He does not insulate himself nor isolate himself from his brothers. Through harmlessness, he has learned to neutralize all evil emanations. Now he acts with a positiveness of a new kind. Definitely and with full awareness of what he is doing, he gathers into himself all the evil emanations, destructive energies, and wrong forces, and he breaks them up into their component parts and returns them whence they came, neutralized, impotent, and harmless, yet intact in nature. You say that this is a hard teaching and conveys but little to the average aspirant? Question mark. Such is ever the way in esoteric teaching, but those who know will understand, and for them I speak. And this is that's a natural evolution, I want to say, and at first I think we have to work on these things consciously, and you have to, there's that implies a hard go for a while.
Right.
It implies the battlefield. It implies an emotional mess for a while.
Right.
As you're learning to deal and transmute those energies. Right. Because initially our response to them is we have a response to them initially.
Right.
Like our own emotional response, but when they come in later, we're not having their emotional response, and they're being taken apart and sent back. Another method is still more advanced and is utilized by the initiate. Through a knowledge of the law and of certain words of power, he can command the energies to reverse themselves and to return to their originating center. But with this method, we have nothing to do. There must as yet be much practice in harmlessness and a close watch kept upon its application in the daily life. The right direction of astral energy can be summed up in its three aspects from the ancient book of rules given to cellas of the entering degrees. All true esoteric schools begin with the control of the astral body, and the cella had to memorize and practice these three rules after he made some real growth in the manifestation of harmlessness. Rule 1 is enter thy brother's heart and see his woe, then speak, let the words spoken convey to him the potent force he needs to loose his chains. Yet loose them not thyself, thine is the work to speak with understanding. The force received by him will aid him in his work. Rule 2, enter thy brother's mind and read his thoughts, but only when thy thoughts are pure. Then think. Let the thoughts thus created enter thy brother's mind and blend with his, yet keep detached thyself, for none have the right to sway a brother's mind. The only right there is will make him say he loves, he standeth by, he knows, he thinks with me, and I am strong to do the right. Learn thus to speak, learn thus to think. And rule 3 is blend with thy brother's soul and know him as he is. Only upon the plane of soul can this be done. Elsewhere, the blending feeds the fuel of his lower life. Then focus on the plan. Thus will he see the part that he and you and all men play. Thus will he enter into life and know the work accomplished. Cool. That's pretty deep, huh? A note appended to these 3 rules says, these 3 energies of speech, of thought, and of purpose, when wielded with understanding by the cella and blended with the awakening forces of his brother, whom he seeks to aid, are the 3 energies with which all adepts work. It is almost impossible to translate these ancient formulas into adequate terms, but the above rough paraphrase will convey the idea to the illumined. These rules sum up the thoughts which the average aspirant needs to grasp about the right direction of energy and for which he is ready. All right. And that is the end of that section, Tom. What are your thoughts?
Well, I like those 3 rules that you just went over.
Yeah, the rules for the right use of energy.
Yeah, and it's when we went over those, you know, enter thy brother's heart, enter thy brother's mind, blend with thy brother's soul. It's almost like move along with them in understanding versus trying to force someone to move in any particular way.
Yeah, don't be trying to change their mind necessarily.
Right.
It's let them come to their own right conclusion.
Right. But be
Or
with them.
not.
Right.
But yeah.
But the point is to be with them. So I like that. That was nice.
Yeah, we're all just walking each other home, right?
Right. Exactly. It's hard path to do on your own. So it's good to have a brother to go along with.
Yeah, no doubt. You really, we have to, right? It is more of a group thing than not, too. And that I was just thinking as you're saying that about that when he referenced above, you know, to understand that the group body, and it's like there's so much to know.
Right.
You know? Yeah. So we got. You know, there's. we you know, he's really. You know, Master DK is really breaking it down for us, man. He's breaking down the astral plane exactly as we see it and experience it, and then how we to view it and how we can observe it, begin to observe it more deeply, then begin to transmute it. Do this work on our own. And he's really not just telling us how to do this on our own. He's also telling us more so how to help our brothers get through. Because once we're reading this, in a sense, we've probably gotten some of the work under our belt. We're really learning how to help others more than anything else. Otherwise, you wouldn't really be able to read this and understand it, I think. Am I wrong to say that in a sense? You're only going to be able to read it to whatever level, but even still.
Right. No, I would agree with that. I think this astral stuff is easiest for us to wrap our heads around because we've lived through it. We're still somewhat living through it. So and it's there for everybody. I mean, I can't imagine there'd be anybody that would read through this and not be able to kind of align themselves with what's being said. And then it's like we talked about earlier. It's I can't remember if we talked about this on camera or not, but this is like a field manual, right?
Yeah.
And there's hints and instructions to right living and how to treat others and things like that baked all throughout it. But it gives you those set of instructions, because we're all currently probably a bit lost in the astral, and it describes it well, and it's easy for it to resonate because there's so many connection points there. Now you just got to take that and live right by it versus continuing to allow yourself to get lost in it and consumed by it, because we're supposed to be moving beyond that.
Yeah, we should be focusing more on our harmlessness.
Right. And selflessness and
Yeah.
right living and right human interactions and things like that. It's there for everybody. It's there for anybody. So,
The stages in that, it does imply, that the astral plane is the battleground for a while.
right.
No doubt. It doesn't have to continue to be the battleground.
Right.
Once it serves its purpose of allowing us to work these, this stuff out, then we just put it behind us.
Right.
The pity is when we have the ability to put it behind us and we don't, I think, right? That's when it doesn't serve us anymore. It's not,
Right.
We have to at least get, like you're saying, what we're talking about, the reappearance of the Christ, that other book, the things from Bethlehem to Calvary, the things in Raised Initiative. This is esoteric psychology. This is the education that is necessary.
Right.
And it's so plainly seen. Yeah, maybe some of the words would be changed to the, I don't know, maybe some of the words, but essentially you can see the human condition in all of these books, man. It's the truth because this is your life. You're just reading about it.
Right.
So I can't, this is the real education that humanity needs from the beginning. And however that's broken out, when this is picked up by the academics and the world leaders who understand this, India, they teach aspects of, metaphysics in school.
Mm-hmm.
They're taught chakras and stuff. And I don't know how deep that goes, but I know it's there. Now, this esoteric psychology and, esoteric, of the human condition, though, for us over here on, in the West, this is what's needed. Who do we call? Hello? Yeah, we need to rearrange the educational system because this is what needs to be, put in schools, starting from the beginning, man. You learn to read, learn to write, do your stuff, but this should be a big focus of the curriculum. So that all that work is going to have to be done someday to work through this too, because at what age is it appropriate to talk about this? I don't know.
Right.
I mean,
well, and it depends on how you layer it in and introduce it too. So, and I've even asked Carla this question before. Where would be a good starting point for my kids? And it's not necessarily for them at that level because they're young budding minds, and expecting a child to read through these materials and try to grasp some kind of understanding for it is, at this point, is a bit moot, because as you and I sometimes struggle understanding what's being said in some cases. But
sure.
The point I'm getting at is, how do you layer the materials into an education system? And anyway, to get my kids started, what she suggested to me was really, it's about teaching them to approach everything with kindness, compassion, all of those principles that Christ,
harmlessness,
yes, selflessness.
But the emotional natures, they start with the feelings, with happy faces and sad faces and stuff. This
Right.
could be worked into that.
Exactly. That's my point.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't be reading this to my 6-year-old, but there's
Right.
elements of it that we could easily probably layer into the life instructions that we give to our children. And that's one way that, folks could go about it. Since this is absent from the structured education system.
Well, it's just amazing that we had to, what did we have to do to find this material? Holy cow, that's crazy.
I still stand firm with the school of thought that the materials found us, my friend.
Right. Well, certainly. Yeah,
Because it's what we needed at the time. They come into your life conveniently at the time when you need them most.
Right on time.
Like I did not even think that any of this thing, I didn't even fathom that any of this existed.
Right.
Until it did.
How could you?
Until it manifested into my world and started having all the aha moments as I'm reading through the materials. So
like this is the real education.
It's Bible study on steroids.
But like we said, but like we talked about yesterday a little bit was, initiation is not conferred upon somebody as an accolade.
Right.
It is due to it happens because of life experience and livingness and living experience.
Right.
Where the soul has gathered all the required essences for the different earthly situations and emotions and all these things that it could be put into. Right. And with proper reactions to certain situations and all these things. We don't have to keep doing things over and over and over and over again. You only need to get it knocked out and keep moving.
Right.
But that's an intense thing, so yeah, there's a lot there, man. That's something really to contemplate on and meditate on. And there's a lot of people ready probably. So this is something that I was contemplating yesterday between us and whoever's going to listen is with the return of the reappearance of Christ, right? And we know these energies, which we were just talking about, the Aquarian energies are going to be adding and changing things a lot.
Right.
And then the question then becomes, to me, the question was, well, how could people hear this and then, when that energy comes, how can it make this happen? It can make this happen because many of the souls have gathered the living experience necessary.
Right.
And they're just stuck right now.
Yep.
Right. So because they're stuck, that's okay. In a sense, it's okay. Because when that energy is present, there will be the necessary jolt out of that. And that impetus that shock will be there. And others will be there also to help guide the thing,
right?
The whole process through at every different level. There's people here at every, there will be here. And those who hadn't woken up yet, when they do wake up, even if they do it does happen at one time because of the new energy as it comes in, that's totally fine.
Right.
We're hadn't done this essentially, almost like the hard way, but the more expedient, not I want to say the hard way, the more expedient way, right? And or hit a brick wall,
right.
and both, whatever the soul's
right.
intent is, which that's hard to say for any individual, but yeah, man. I mean, so you can start to see how the reappearance of Christ can really happen how these things can be understood, and this new education will come about, and what his teachings will be, and harmlessness, right, human relations, right, the use of all this stuff here. And the reason that it can happen is because we've evolved and been here long enough to gather the essences that were needed. We just need that that big jolt.
Yeah. And I think
That
it's
was my
important.
contemplation yesterday.
Well, it's a great one. And it's one that we should all always be contemplating on, because with all that, a lot of change is going to come. And that change could cause discomfort for some as we evolve, right? But the reality is that whether you like it or not, there's no point in denying what's happening. There's no point in holding yourself back. There's no point really in pushing against the grain, so to speak, because it's going to happen whether you want it to or not. Now, I would stress that everybody actually wants this to happen, because yes, there's going to be change that comes along with all this, and it's going to create some discomfort, but the light at the end of the tunnel is beautiful and bright, right, man? So
Yeah,
my point is, you work through it. Everybody's going to go through this, so there's really no point in kind of holding yourself back from it. It's better to prepare yourself for what's coming
and be ahead of the game. Yeah,
and be ahead of the game, and have an understanding for what is happening to you at this certain point in time, and just have yourself ready for whatever it is that comes, because it is going to be a whole new era, and it's going to be a wonderful thing. So
it's it's going to stimulate. I try to think about how this would be in a more of a controlled environment with many teachers around, right? Like, who are able to observe, and when the recognition is made by humanity that the teachers are here, right? The process, I still going to be intense, very intense, no less intense than it was for any other aspirant or initiate or disciple or probation, whoever before. It's not going to be any less intense. So there's nothing taken away from it.
right.
It's just a matter of those who had done it before will be the ones helping it now, guiding it now,
Right.
as it comes. And to think about that taking place on a mass scale, what a different world this will be, because they still are, let's say, it comes, humanity takes whatever, first initiation. Right after that happens, we get thrown back on ourselves materially right away, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's going to be that. All the process is still going to continue exactly the same way. But by the time 1,000 years from now, or whatever, and the numbers 2/3, I think make it 2/3 before the end of the cycle, are make it to the get to the next level. So
Mm-hmm.
we're also not expecting everyone to. It's not going to be like every single person.
Right.
There's still going to be, and it says that they get held over. They don't lose what they've got either. They get held
Right.
over for the next cycle. It's like getting set back in kindergarten.
You're recycled in tech school.
Recycle. Get recycled.
Right.
So, yeah, it's just so amazing, man. So amazing that we get to, these books were here all these years that we were here and we didn't know it.
Right. Well, we do now. They found their way
that's
to
great.
us, and
Yeah.
they feed our soul. So it's
All right,
serving its
man.
purpose.
Well,
So will we be picking up the present and the future next week, or are we taking a hiatus because of your
oh,
travels?
yeah, I guess I'll have to miss next week, or you'll have to do it, or we'll have to do it prior to leaving. But if you want to do it, you're more than happy. You can do it and whatever. But let me one way or another, there'll be videos to watch, I assume.
Right.
Hold on one second. At least maybe if it's not next week, it'll be the week after.
For sure. I think.